I sat in William Peterson's office, the scent of lemon polish lingering in the mahogany paneling. His desk loomed between us, a fortress of legal documents and framed photographs of my late father. It had been 1 week since we buried Richard Clark beneath a polished granite headstone that celebrated his career, but revealed nothing of the man behind the accolades. 1 week of sleepless nights of casseroles from neighbors of my mother Eleanor, accepting condolences with perfect poise, and of my sister Victoria, documenting her grief in black and white Instagram posts, curated for sympathy clicks. Peterson, my father's longtime attorney, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. As you know, Dr. Clark's estate is substantial, nearly $10 million, not including property. My mother straightened in her chair, her pearl earrings catching the light grief accessorized with Chanel precision. Eleanor Peterson continued, "You'll inherit the primary residence and the investment portfolio." She nodded, expression serene, but eyes sharp. "Victoria, you will receive the lakeside property and the trust fund established on your 21st birthday." My sister's manicured nails pressed into my hand theatrically, the gesture more for social media optics than solidarity. And Isabella Peterson said, his gaze flickering with hesitation, "Your father has left you controlling interest in Clark Medical Technologies and the bulk of his liquid assets." My breath caught. The weight of responsibility and opportunity pressed down before he added almost gently, "But there is a condition." I stiffened. My father never gave freely, not in life, and apparently, not in death. The bequest is contingent upon confirmation of paternity through DNA testing. The words hit like a slap. My hands trembled against the leather armrests, humiliation heating my cheeks. My mother's voice slipped into a honeyed tone that concealed venom. "Surely there's some mistake." Victoria leaned closer with false sympathy. Poor Bella Daddy always did have a dark sense of humor. Peterson removed his glasses, polishing them methodically. "The instructions are specific. Miss Clark must provide DNA verification from an accredited laboratory results, compared against family markers already on file." On file, my voice sounded hollow. "Your father provided his own sample before his passing," Peterson explained. "He was thorough." Of course he was. A memory surfaced: my 10th birthday. Victoria played the piano while father beamed. Later, when I showed him my straight A report card, he barely glanced at it. "Books are easy, Isabella. Real accomplishment requires something special. Nothing I did was ever special enough." Now, even in death, he demanded proof of belonging. Part of me wanted to refuse to deny him this final cruelty, but another part, the archivist in me who valued truth above stories, needed answers. "Evidence doesn't lie. People do." "I'll arrange the testing," I said quietly. 3 days later, I was cataloging letters in the university archives when my phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. "On our way to your condo." I sighed. Margaret, my colleague and one of the few people unentangled in Clark family politics, raised an eyebrow. "Want me to stay late?" "No," I said. I should face them. When I arrived home, Eleanor's silver Mercedes gleamed in the visitor spot. Inside, she perched on my sofa like it might soil her dress, while Victoria wandered, pretending interest in my framed botanical prints. "We let ourselves in," Victoria said sweetly. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. "Darling, we're concerned," Eleanor replied. "This dreadful situation with the will." "We've consulted another attorney," Victoria interrupted. "There may be ways around father's stipulation." "The conditions were clear," I said. Eleanor sighed, fingers brushing her pearls. "Your father had trust issues. He questioned loyalties constantly. This DNA nonsense is just another extension of his paranoia." The word lodged in my mind. Paranoia. She described private investigators' demands for proof, meticulous documentation, even of family matters. My thoughts raced, connecting memories I'd long dismissed: father's coldness, his strange gifts, his obsessive journals. Perhaps this wasn't about humiliating me, but exposing something else. Victoria shifted, impatient, slipping through her polished mask. "This delay is inconvenient. I have commitment sponsorships deadlines. The inheritance funds are already allocated. And your country club dues? Mother? I asked quietly. Eleanor stiffened. The truth was clear. They weren't only worried about appearances, they were desperate. Before they could press further, my phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Found something in the hospital archives. Call me. My decision crystallized. I need you both to leave, I said firmly. Alone, I called Margaret. She had uncovered journals from my father's collection entries that mentioned my mother and a French surgeon named Laurent. The name sparked an old memory, my parents arguing when I was a child. Laurent's fellowship had ended, but suspicion lingered. At the archives the next day, Margaret showed me father's journal. His precise handwriting detailed his doubts in 1991, the year of my birth. 9 months of unexplained absences, private calls, now pregnancy. The child cannot be mine unless medical science is wrong. My stomach turned. Margaret added photocopied newsletters showing my mother at hospital functions with Laurent, their closeness undeniable. The timeline was damning. My father hadn't orchestrated this DNA test to humiliate me, he had wanted the truth confirmed. For the first time, fear gave way to clarity. The test wasn't merely about inheritance, it was about identity. And I had no choice but to follow the truth wherever it led. By the time I left the archives, my mind was buzzing with the implications. My father's journals, Margaret's research, the photographs of my mother laughing too closely with Dr. Laurent, all of it painted a picture that unsettled me more deeply than the will itself. If my father had suspected for decades that I wasn't his child, then the DNA test wasn't punishment. It was his last desperate attempt to confirm what he had feared all along. The next morning, I walked into Boston Genetic Partners, the sterile air reeking of antiseptic. The receptionist processed me without a smile. A cheek swab, a sealed vial, a barcode. That was all it took to reduce my existence to a number. Lots of people do this for ancestry research, the technician offered lightly. Not me, I murmured. I'm confirming the family I already have. Back home, I spread the growing pile of evidence across my dining table. Hospital newsletters, society photographs, my father's journal entries. A clear timeline emerged. Dr. Laurent's arrival in Boston in 1990, the galas and fundraisers he attended with my mother, my birth the following November. It all aligned too perfectly. Margaret arrived later with folders and takeout, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. The directories confirm your mother and Laurent worked together on several committees, she said. We mapped out the connections until my table resembled a detective's investigation board. For an archivist, it was strangely exhilarating. But beneath the thrill was fear. If the test confirmed what the evidence suggested, then everything I believed about myself, my name, my place, my identity could unravel in an instant. 3 days later, an email arrived. Inconclusive results. Please provide a second sample. My stomach dropped. Contamination, or something more sinister, I called immediately, only to be told that unusual genetic markers sometimes complicated testing. I suspected father's hand, even here, his meticulous planning reaching from beyond the grave to prolong my torment. I refused to let him win. The next morning, I went to a second, more prestigious lab. This time, they drew blood promising expedited results. As I left, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't running from the truth anymore. I was chasing it. Meanwhile, Victoria intensified her campaign. Her Instagram filled with staged grief and captions dripping with betrayal. When family cuts deeper than grief, her followers sympathized, oblivious to the fact that she already knew more than she admitted. Margaret confirmed it when she cross-referenced hospital archives. Laurent had been in Boston, not only before my birth, but before Victoria's as well. My father had doubted us both. I called Victoria, asking her to meet me at the archives. She arrived late, perfumed and polished, irritation radiating from every pore. I rescheduled a sponsor call for this, she said. I handed her the folder, letting her see the photographs, the timelines, the journal entries in Father's own hand. Her face drained of color as she read. "This is absurd," she whispered, though her trembling fingers betrayed her. "I'm taking the DNA test," I told her. "Are you ready for what it might reveal about you too?" Her composure faltered. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said. "For once, I'm not the one being manipulated." When she stormed out, I knew the balance had shifted. She'd spent her life as Father's favorite, the golden child. Now she was afraid. Days stretched like weeks as I waited for the results. Margaret brought directories, photographs, staff lists. Peterson visited with color-coded folders outlining possible legal outcomes. Both daughters confirmed neither or only one. He lingered on the blue folder marked only Isabella. "Be prepared," he warned. Finally, the email arrived. My finger hovered over the trackpad, paralyzed by dread. Then I clicked. The words blurred through my tears. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Relief flooded me. I was Richard Clark's daughter. But a second attachment waited. I opened it, my heart thudding. The supplemental report revealed a startling fact: Victoria and I shared only maternal markers, different fathers. My breath caught. Father's suspicions had been right all along. Margaret and Peterson helped me prepare the evidence for the inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, Victoria launched a preemptive strike. She posted dramatic photos by Father's grave captions hinting at psychological abuse and toxic wills. She'd even contacted a society columnist, ensuring the scandal would hit the Sunday pages. Eleanor called, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "Isabella, don't destroy this family. These tests are often wrong. Victoria is already speaking to lawyers." But I remembered my father's words from years ago. "History isn't what people wish happened, Isabella. It's what actually occurred." He had valued truth even when painful. The next morning, I walked into Peterson's office with folders, organized timelines, documented photographs authenticated. Eleanor and Victoria arrived together, polished and composed, masks firmly in place. But I was ready. For the first time in my life, I held the power. Peterson ushered us into the conference room instead of his office, the long mahogany table gleaming beneath recessed lights. Water glasses and legal pads were neatly arranged, as if this were a corporate negotiation rather than a reckoning of blood and truth. Margaret sat at the far end with stacks of documents, her calm presence steadying me. Eleanor and Victoria entered together, synchronized as always. Eleanor in black Armani pearls flashing. Victoria in cream linen gold accessories, gleaming a perfect image for her followers. But their poise faltered when they saw Margaret waiting with files. "I wasn't aware this would be a group meeting," Eleanor said sweetly. "Isabella requested additional space for documentation," Peterson replied. I distributed the manila folders I had prepared, each tabbed and highlighted. My hands didn't shake. Years of archival work had trained me for precision, and today it served me well. "What's all this?" Victoria asked, her folder unopened. "Evidence," I said simply. Eleanor skimmed her folder with cool detachment until her fingers froze on the highlighted DNA results. Victoria watched her mother's reaction before opening her own, her face blanching as she read the words, "Maternal match only." "These tests are often inaccurate," Eleanor said quickly, her voice rising. "Surely second opinions are needed." I anticipated that, I replied, placing another set of results on the table. "Different lab. Same conclusion." Peterson cleared his throat. "Both reports appear scientifically sound and legally admissible." Victoria slammed her folder shut. "Ridiculous. A lab error doesn't erase 34 years of family history." "It's not just the DNA," I said, sliding out a timeline. Margaret added a hospital directory, then a newsletter photo of Eleanor and Dr. Laurent co-chairing a fundraiser in 1986, 9 months before Victoria's birth. The silence was suffocating. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water. "The DNA shows I am Father's biological daughter," I continued steadily. "Victoria is not." Margaret laid down another photo, Eleanor laughing beside Laurent, Victoria's chin, dimple mirrored in his. Eleanor pressed her palms flat against the table as though trying to anchor herself. Richard and I, we were struggling, she whispered. He was never home. Laurent noticed me when Richard didn't. Her words spilled out brittle and tired after decades of concealment. Victoria gasped, mascara smudging as she turned to her mother. You, how could you? Eleanor reached for her hand. It was brief, only months before he returned to France. Peterson adjusted his glasses. Legally, the implications are clear. The will requires biological relation to Dr. Clark to inherit Clark Medical and the liquid assets. That condition is satisfied only by Isabella. Victoria shoved back from the table, her voice breaking. So that's it. My life erased by a test. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw not the golden child, but a woman crushed under the weight of a truth she never asked for. The victory I had anticipated felt hollow. It doesn't have to end this way, I said. The will names me as sole heir, but I can choose differently. William draft a trust for Victoria. She should have stability too. Peterson raised an eyebrow. That is generous. Not required. Family isn't defined only by DNA or legal documents, I said. I want to be better than father's example. Eleanor sagged in her chair, years of composure finally cracking. Why would you do this after everything? Because truth isn't meant to punish, it's meant to free. Victoria wiped her cheek, suspicion warring with fragile hope. I don't understand you. You don't need to, I said softly. Just know I won't erase you. Margaret quietly collected the evidence no longer needed now that the truth was spoken aloud. My father had tried to control us from beyond the grave, but instead he had forced us into authenticity. A year later, I stood in what had once been his office at Clark Medical Technologies. The mahogany desk now bore my papers, not his. Through the windows, Boston spread out, golden leaves drifting across the common. Board members who once dismissed me now sought my approval. I had become the leader father never acknowledged, but apparently always suspected I could be. Eleanor sold the family home, retreating to a Beacon Hill condo. Our lunches were awkward, but she had begun speaking Antoine Laurent's name without flinching. Victoria moved to California, her Instagram stripped of family references replaced with sunsets and reinvention. Our relationship existed now in short, careful emails and the occasional phone call. Cautious, but real. One afternoon, Margaret and I sorted through a banker's box of father's papers. Inside, we found medical records, his own DNA testing conducted decades earlier. He had known the truth all along. He could have spared us, I whispered. Or maybe this was his way of ensuring the truth surfaced, Margaret said gently. Perhaps she was right. 2 years after father's death, I found myself standing at his grave again. The granite headstone bore his name, his achievements the legacy of a brilliant surgeon. But as morning mist curled through the cemetery, I felt none of the old bitterness. No anger at his coldness, no triumph at being confirmed his daughter. Only a strange, quiet gratitude. I laid white lilies against the stone, their perfume sweet in the autumn air. You thought this would destroy us, I whispered, but it forced us to build something real instead. In the months after the revelation, I had assumed Clark Medical Technologies would be the only inheritance that mattered. But I learned otherwise. The most valuable gift father left was truth, the truth that fractured illusions, but also allowed rebuilding on honest ground. The Clark Family Foundation was about to launch its mission dedicated to supporting children separated from their biological parents. Eleanor surprisingly had suggested it. Something useful must come from all of this, she said, her voice wavering with both shame and resolve. She agreed to serve as honorary chairperson. Victoria, from her new life in California, contributed remotely, designing the foundation's website with quiet dedication. For once, she posted not about herself, but about the cause. Our relationships weren't healed overnight. Eleanor and I met for monthly dinners where conversation was halting and sometimes strained. She confessed in fragments how lonely she had been during her marriage. Richard only saw his work, she admitted one evening, twisting her napkin. Antoine noticed me, He valued my thoughts when your father could not. Victoria and I spoke sporadically. Her influencer empire had survived, though, reshaped into something less glossy, more grounded. She confessed during one call, "Every memory I have, I wonder if it's real, or if I've just been playing a role." Her vulnerability was raw, unfamiliar. I realized then that we had both been actors in Father's silent play, performing the roles he set, without ever understanding the script. At Clark Medical, I carried the company into a new era. The boardroom that once displayed only my father's awards now bore my vision. I donated his accolades to the medical school, keeping only one photograph: father holding me as an infant, his expression unreadable, but his grip protective. The company flourished under my leadership not because of his shadow, but because I finally stepped into my own light. Margaret remained my closest ally, my confidant. One evening, as we sifted through the last of Father's personal archives, she handed me a folder labeled "Family Records Confidential." Inside were decades-old genetic screenings. He had known beyond doubt that Victoria was not his biological daughter. And yet he had kept her close, raised her under his name, and only at the very end demanded the truth be recorded. Why keep the secret so long, I wondered aloud. Margaret looked at me with the calm wisdom she always carried. "You're an archivist, Isabella. You know better than most truth waits. Sometimes it needs the right moment to be uncovered." Perhaps Father had been waiting for me to be strong enough to bear it. The morning of the foundation launch, I stood before a crowd of donors, press, and supporters. My speech was short, but every word carried the weight of 2 years of turmoil. Family, I said, is more than biology. It is truth, even when painful. It is choosing connection when lies would be easier. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not what's written in a will, but the freedom to rebuild authentically. Applause filled the hall, but I thought only of Father's headstone, of the mist curling in the cemetery, of the lilies I had left at his grave. For all his coldness, for all his manipulations, he had given me the gift I needed most: the courage to face truth and to define family on my own terms. Walking back to my office after the launch, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had become not just the daughter he doubted, but the woman who could carry his legacy forward while shaping her own. Eleanor had found honesty after decades of pretense. Victoria had shed her facade and begun the difficult work of rediscovery. And I finally had stepped out of their shadows. The inheritance was more than money, more than a company. It was liberation. Sometimes the most precious thing a parent can leave behind isn't wealth or property. It's the truth that sets you free. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, what does family mean to you?